Fearless and truthful. Provocative and controversial.
We say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect. Committed to free speech and common sense. Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. This week, a university football team in America visited the White House. But because of the government shutdown, there were no chefs around to provide them with food. So their big-hearted host, one Donald Trump, got out his even bigger wallet and ordered in some fast food.
We have pizzas, we have 300 hamburgers, many French fries, all of our favorite foods. I want to see what's here when we leave, because I don't think it's going to be much.
Now, on The Pledge, we don't get provided with any food, but fortunately, our own big-hearted friend with a big wallet got some cash out and ordered in some grub for us. So tuck in, everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, for goodness sake,
well,
it's empty.
It's dry January. We're all on diets, so that's why I did
You,
that. There we are.
You
see.
ate that.
Yeah.
You ate them. OK, coming up this week, I argue our leaders don't understand this. Majid says we all need to be a bit nicer. Nick is razoring his eyebrows at a new advert. And Michelle says locking up the bad guys is right, however long it's for. But first, it's Greg.
What a complete mess. What a cock-up. What a total disaster. Welcome to the world of Theresa May and the most incompetent government in my lifetime. It all started when Mrs May triggered Article 50 too early, with no strategy, leaving us with no negotiating position with the EU. She then lost her majority in that fateful election, and instead of trying to bring a range of views from all parties together to work out a way of achieving a Brexit which could command a majority in Parliament, she carried on as if nothing had happened. The result? Ridicule from Europe, a bad deal, and a crushing defeat on Tuesday. So what happens now? I suspect there are a majority of MPs willing to work out a Brexit of sorts, but they don't support her deal. They won't support it with a few tweaks, and they certainly won't countenance no deal. It could turn out that a second referendum is the only answer, not that I'd like to predict the result. But when a Prime Minister is defeated on such a serious issue, he or she should resign, as David Cameron did, or call a general election, as Jim Callaghan did in 1979. Mrs May should certainly go. She got us into this shambles, and probably the only certainty is that she won't be able to get us out of it.
It's interesting because I was going to challenge you, actually. You say it's the worst government in your lifetime. I would say perhaps Jim Callaghan's it ended in 1979 was up there. But let's focus on where we find ourselves now. And really, this is what should happen. You're right, it was a crushing defeat. It was an historical defeat. So we should probably remind the viewers exactly what happened. Let's go back to that moment.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
You're absolutely right. Crushing, actually, Greg, I think is quite a nice way. You can put it far worse than that. I will come to what should happen, because that's the focus of this. I honestly think what shouldn't happen is doing it again. If you allow that it's been incredibly divisive, if you allow that there is chaos, I just think it will become even more divisive and even more chaotic, so I really don't see that. I interviewed Michael Portillo on my radio show. Now, I know he's a bit of a divisive figure himself, but he actually said anybody who thinks they know what is going to happen is either deluded or drunk, or probably both. And he's probably onto something there, and at the moment, hopefully, I'm neither. But the interesting thing, and I'll now yield, is that on Sky News they had Professor, I think it's Bogdanor, who's like the constitutional expert. And do you realise the default position of where we find ourselves now is that if they don't do a deal of sorts, it will be a no deal on March the 29th. So that is what we're moving towards, which I don't think serves anybody. So I would call on everyone, whether Mr Corbyn has anything to offer, I'm sure others have to say, I really think the Conservatives, I think the hard right, the ERG, whatever, I think you have to look at some form of customs union to get us over the hurdle so we don't move to a no deal. That's what I think should happen.
I mean, it's interesting. I've talked to quite a lot of politicians the last couple of days. Just nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, it's really interesting. I've never known a time when you say,
least of all Mrs May.
And the thing is, there has to be a consensus for what's going to happen next, and there won't be a consensus on anything. There won't be a consensus on a Norway-style option because that involves paying money and having free movement. There will not be a consensus on no deal. So the default position and the position that is written into UK law is that we leave without a deal. But I'm like you. I've been saying for a long time that I think Theresa May should go. And what I couldn't believe when I saw that the vote the other night, where she lost by a majority of 230, she still was saying afterwards to people, and her people were putting out that even if this deal fails, which it has, she will put a version of this deal to Parliament again. And they're thinking now this invitation that she's given everyone to come and talk is a ruse because she hasn't listened to anyone in the past. Why would she suddenly listen to them now? So here we are in this situation with a woman who, she knows this deal is not going to work. She knows the public won't wear it. It's like someone who keeps banging their head against the same wall until it bleeds, and it keeps bleeding, and she won't change.
But it's not really about the public, is it? It's about Parliament now.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on a few things you said, Greg. Firstly, to say that she got us into this mess. I'm not quite sure she did. I think David Cameron called the referendum, but even Cameron, I think the calling of the referendum was the culmination of perhaps 20 years of build-up towards that point. And I have some sympathy for her, though I've never voted Conservative in my life, because... And it's one of the reasons why no other Tory wants to take her position at this current moment in time, and that's because there is, quite frankly, her hands are tied. There's not much she can do in her situation. And actually, even the leader of Her Majesty's Opposition, a.k.a. Dominic Grieve, concedes that point. Let's have a look at what he said.
It's absolutely right that her deal has been rejected because across the House, the analysis of its failings has been identical. That's not the Prime Minister's fault. I'm afraid that's the inherent consequence of Brexit and the negotiation that's followed. We could have had a different leader, it would still have led to the same outcome.
So the reason I show you that is because actually the point he makes at the beginning there is that anyone in that position would have had to deal with the same poisoned chalice.
But they would have handled it in a different way.
No, yeah, maybe. Yeah, you're right.
From
maybe,
the moment she didn't, but from the moment she didn't get a big majority of the election,
but
she could have known. You could have seen.
Just around my
she didn't get. OK, but let's make this point because you've made the point. She went in and she didn't tell them what she wanted. She took what they offered. She's the worst negotiator in the world. She could have got.
I'm not going to dispute that. I think if she resigns, there's no one to replace her. That's my main point, right? And the second point I'd like to say on the main point is a general election won't solve the problem because whoever comes in will have this particular problem to deal with. And so really, I think it hinges on Corbyn, the actual, meant to be the leader of the opposition. And why I say that is, if he had a Brexit stance that was clear, discernible, understandable, he could lead this country towards something else. But he isn't the leader. He has no stance. We don't know where he stands.
Let me introduce you to a Sky News Australian presenter who I think has very recently hit the nail on the head with Brexit.
This Brexit fiasco, well, it's about as bad as it gets. One of the world's great countries can't decide whether it's in or out of the European Union, whether it accepts or rejects the democratic vote to leave, and whether it can or it cannot work out a credible way forward. This whole shambles shows what happens when the people in charge don't believe in what they are supposedly trying to do.
And that clip, by the way, continues, and to me, she really does get to the nuts and bolts of what's going on.
But what happens next? What should happen, Misha? Because we all agree it's a shambles.
Yeah, so what is going to happen? And what I wish...
What should?
Yeah, OK, what should happen? I wish that I could come with a one-line answer to that would be simple and easy. And I just don't think that there is one. I think, obviously, she's going to have to come back with her Plan B. I think they're voting on that on the 29th, I think.
Plan B is next month. Is this coming Monday? That's her deadline.
Yeah, and they're going to vote on that on the 29th.
She's not going to get any deal through Parliament. This is the problem, because I don't think there's any deal could be put on the table at this moment.
You're saying she should go for the WTO?
I am saying we should definitely go for WTO.
But I thought that was
I don't know what people are scared. But it is the legal default position.
However, can I explain technically why it may not happen? Technically, legally, and according to parliamentary sovereignty. So what's happened recently with the Burko, Dominic Grieve agreement or
Yes,
understanding,
amendment.
right? But they've come to an understanding that they will suspend Standing Order 14 and the parliamentary standing orders, which will allow for non-government motions to be heard.
Yeah.
Now, what Grieve plans to do is legally, legislatively, bind Parliament, which has a majority support in Parliament, to block the default no-deal option on the 29th of March. If he and the Speaker of the House succeed in that, then what would you do next? Because then you'd be blocked.
But I'll tell you what happens if they do that.
Yeah.
That means the EU doesn't have to give us anything. If we effectively in this country block a no deal, why would the EU capitulate and give us another single thing?
That's not my question to you.
But
my question is, they will do that.
I
so
want to
what would
pick you up
next?
on something you said before. You said there is no one to take her place.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. I think she's responsible for the logjam. I think if she wasn't there, someone different, someone better could be tougher. I don't know whether any of you guys saw Michael Gove's speech before.
It was excellent.
Superb.
Wasn't it superb?
Excellent.
And I was
Absolutely.
looking at him and thinking, future Prime
But
Minister.
Carol, back to the point, though, if they did do that,
That
if
is
they
the
did
point,
block
because
the no-deal option through
Right.
Parliament,
Okay.
what would you want to happen next?
I think we should leave. What I think should happen is we should leave with the no deal.
No, I see.
everyone's saying
But
that
that's not my
can't
question.
I see. So,
Yeah,
But why
if
should
they
we?
were to
Why
block it in
should
Parliament?
I don't want to talk about this now because this is my debate.
Yeah.
But parliamentarians should not be allowed to hijack. hijack
Okay,
this
but if they
process.
were
And
to
that's
block
what
a
they're doing.
no-deal option in Parliament, which is what it looks like may happen with the Grieve-Bercow understanding, what would your next best option be to achieve what you want to achieve with Brexit?
Well, there is no we're out of options then apart from to remain,
So
and
what
I
would
don't
you like
want
to
to
see
do
happen
that.
next? In the real world, life continues. So if they do block no-deal in Parliament, what would you like to see happen
Well,
next?
it's interesting you're asking me when there's no one in Parliament can actually sort that out, Madeleine. I can't give you the answer
No,
for
but
that.
they're not in front of me. You're in front of me.
But I can't give the answer.
Okay.
But what I would prefer, if they don't block a no deal, is to just leave. I don't know why we're all so
I would suggest in that
terrified.
situation, in those circumstances, it's in Brexiters' interests, as well as in Remainers like me,
to back her deal.
if it is blocked in Parliament, I mean, the only option left to both Brexiters and Remainers, and the last hope for both Brexiters and Remainers in the scenario I've just painted, would be to go back to the people and have a vote.
No.
If all else is blocked.
There's no consensus
Okay, so you're
for that,
saying no.
Madeleine.
What
Madeleine,
else
there
would
is
be
no-
left? What else would
There
be
is
left
no
possible?
consensus for
I
a
know,
referendum.
but I'm asking you what else would be possible if they blocked
Anyway,
no-deal
it's
in
not
Parliament.
What would you go back
Yeah.
with, though?
We got to
For a
move on.
vote.
We're still going to be
a transferable vote option with 3 options on the
man
on the
alive.
Can we just stop because we've got to move to the next debate and it's going to be about Brexit anyway, so you can get this point out there.